Hello, and welcome to this week's episode where I'm going to be chatting with another certified financial planner like myself, Anthony Delauney. Anthony is based in the United States of America and has written a series of books around the idea of owning the dash, which he explains in detail in our conversation. It is a concept inspired by a very personal story about his cousin and involves applying the mindset of a fitness master to the art of financial planning. So in this podcast, Anthony shares the family story that inspired his work, tells us more about his books and their key messages, and why financial planning should be a family affair. If you're watching our conversation on YouTube this week, you may notice that you can only see Anthony and you can't see me, as a technical glitch meant that I didn't manage to record myself. Hopefully we'll be back to normal for the next episode. Welcome to the Retirement Cafe podcast, Anthony Delauney.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
So whereabouts in America are you, Anthony?
I'm in Cary, North Carolina.
Wow. And how is life at the moment? You know, we're talking, where are we? End of March 2022. So what's life like after the last couple of years in the US?
Life is like probably where it is many other parts of the world. We're all just trying to adapt to whatever the new normal is. I don't think any of us really know what the new normal is, but it's pretty nice weather-wise. Weather's starting to warm up, so we're enjoying that. But outside of that, it's actually starting to get pretty nice where mask rules are starting to be relieved and whatnot, and people are getting out and starting to do things again and interact with each other. So. Yeah. Aside from the more serious global affairs, we're trying to just live normal lives, I guess is probably the best way to say it.
So Anthony, like myself, you're a certified financial planner. We both hold that kind of international designation. But tell the audience a little bit about what is it that you do in your day-to-day life?
Sure. So I came into the financial services industry about 19 years ago. And in that time, I came right out of college. And in that time, I got married, had 2 kids. I now have a 12-year-old and a 10-year-old. And just throughout that process, I discovered that I had a passion for helping families. So it's just always been about families for me, and just all the unique things that families tend to go through. So it was back around 2015 that I actually had a very kind of personal event that happened in my life that really changed the trajectory of the way I run my life, the way I run my practice. And it was unfortunately a bit of a sad event. I had a cousin, his name was Greg Plitt, Plitt. And Greg was really famous in the fitness world. He was on the cover of over 250 fitness magazines, and just people would look at him and look at me and not believe that he's my cousin because his physique looked a little different than my own. But unfortunately, Greg passed away unexpectedly in 2015. So just kind of as a way to remember him, he had a website where members would email in questions on life and fitness, and he would answer those questions doing video blogs. And I started watching those videos to just kind of remember my cousin, and I realized that a lot of his philosophies as they relate to fitness could also apply to the world of finance. So I thought, how could I share with others out there? And I decided the best way to do it would be to write a book about it. So
wow.
Owning the Dash came to life.
So how old was Greg when he passed on?
He was 37.
Wow, it is young. Yeah. And sorry, I cut over you a little bit. So the first book was called?
So the first full title was Owning the Dash, Applying the Mindset of a Fitness Master to the Art of Family Financial Planning.
Wow.
And a lot of individuals, they hear Owning the Dash and what's that all about? Doesn't really make it doesn't have anything to do with money. And honestly, one of Greg's videos was on the concept of death. And owning the dash actually refers to, on your tombstone, you have your birth date and you have your death date and the dash in between. And the thought process is, that's your time. That's your time on this earth to actually create your legacy and do all the things you say you're going to do. So you get this limited period of time to do it. And are you going to take ownership of that? Own your dash.
Wow.
So it was very powerful to me. The title, it was my first book, so I didn't fully grasp that most people would read that title and not have any idea what it was all about. But it definitely inspired me. And so I felt it was important to keep that title and that concept alive.
Yeah. And so for those who've not read it, what is the key concept about owning this dash?
Sure. It's just the idea that a lot of times when it comes to the way we take care of ourselves or the things or the passions we have in our life, whether it's physically or financially or emotionally, spiritually, we have so many things that kind of allow us to make, whether you want to call it excuses or fear or whatnot, that prevent us from actually pursuing the goals that we have for our life, the dreams that we have. And I think it's the idea of owning it is just really recognizing what are these things, not just what do we want, what is our vision for this ideal scenario, but what are we doing to prevent ourselves from getting there? You know, what steps do we need to take? Are we actually going to take action and change the things that are holding us back? And one of the things I mentioned, the story is built around families. The book is built around helping families. And I say in the book that words like family and tomorrow can be great motivators, but on the same way, they can be great excuses too. You know, I'll deal with that tomorrow, or I can't do that now. I've got to do this for my family. And you should never put family second, but it doesn't mean you should also forget about yourself. If you don't take, it's just kind of like on the airplane, they say, put the mask on yourself first. You need to take care of yourself. Otherwise, you're not going to be there to take care of the family. So yes, it's just kind of really taking ownership of your life and not allowing those little things that you hear in the back of your head to say, you do it tomorrow, or I'll deal with this later, or it's, I don't have time or the ability to do it now.
Yeah. And so when you're working kind of one-on-one or one-on with a family, how do you help them prioritize the things that they should be working on?
So I think it's really interesting that when it comes to the family dynamic, it's you have usually two individuals, spouses or partners, that are, they have their own interpretations of what they see for their futures. And a lot of times they don't necessarily share that with each other. And it's not, there's a variety of reasons. It could be just, life gets in the way, or they're afraid they're going to get told no, that's not the way we want to go. And then they just avoid the conversation. But a lot of times that's the initial piece. Having a third party there sometimes really helps to just kind of, it's almost like, why do therapists exist? Why do coaches exist? Why do financial advisors exist? One of the main priorities with hiring somebody or bringing somebody on is that you have a third party that's not going to be biased towards one or the other, or should not be biased towards one or the other. And it gives kind of that outlet of being able to express really what your goals are and priorities in a non-emotional manner. I think that one thing, especially in the world of finance, that we've learned is that emotion, while it's very important to have, emotion and money do not work well together. So it is important to have, sometimes we separate the two, but when it comes to that vision for the future, it is a very emotional type thing. And having that discussion and really creating a game plan for how to bring not only your personal goals to life, but also your shared visions to life, it's incredibly important. One thing I've seen with retirees, as an example, is sometimes individuals or couples retire, and the first year of retirement is really hard because they don't, they don't have, they haven't had that discussion yet. And all of a sudden now this free time is available, and they're trying to think of, I thought I was going to be doing this during retirement, and my spouse thought I was going to be doing something totally different. And if you go into it not, discussing that game plan, then all of a sudden there's a lot of what I call the quiet time, where you just, there's a period where you may not be talking to each other, or just having difficulty expressing what you're really thinking. And then eventually you kind of settle into a pattern. And I think that the big thing about retirement is it shouldn't be a time of settling in. It should be a time of pursuing that next great step in life, that vision, owning that next stage in your dash.
Yeah, yeah. And of course, even within couples and even within families, people can have different responses to money.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me about the
Absolutely.
challenges that you help there.
So oftentimes what we see, what I've seen is that obviously every dynamic is different with families, but you usually have one that has a bit more passion around money and one who maybe doesn't have. Opposites attract, as they say. So when you have I think it's important for both to be on the same game plan, because even if one doesn't have a passion for money, they still need to know what's going on. And it also helps to allow the person who might be a bit more conservative or concerned about the money to kind of express why. If we do this, if we go on vacations every other month or something like that, we're going to run out by this point. Well, if you can see that laid out, it's much easier to have that discussion on making sure that both parties are satisfied with what their goals and their purposes in retirement. And I think that that's the biggest thing. If we can reduce the stress in the retirement years, then it makes all the things, it makes the vacations that much more enjoyable. It makes just the way you live out your life a lot easier to go by.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned something a moment or two ago about the kind of parallels between the fitness industry and financial planning. Tell me more about that.
So in the beginning of the book, the biggest thing I stress just kind of across the board and that I've learned is that a lot of times it goes back to that concept of fear. And we sometimes don't do things because we fear we're going to be judged. We fear that we made the wrong decisions. I actually read recently that the financial advisor industry is kind of more feared than most other. It's scary to talk to a financial advisor than it is to go to a dentist or something like that. And just to kind of give a personal example, when I was writing the book, I was watching my cousin's videos, going back to his website, and he had over 600 different exercises that were available. And so I had worked out in the past, but this was a whole new world to me. Trying to see all these new things. And so I would go to the gym in the morning, trying these exercises and not really knowing what I was doing and realizing just how weak I was. And while I was there was a gentleman there that was in really, really good shape. He had a really solid build. He was lifting my body weight. So every time I showed up at the gym, I would go in the morning, and he would always be there and just fully motivated, doing his thing. And I came into the gym frustrated. I came in and I saw him as someone who was judging me. I had never talked to him, and yet I kind of started to convince myself, because his quote unquote net worth was better than mine. He was in better shape than I was, that he was somehow better than me and that he was looking down on me. And so I would go into the gym upset, not really thinking about my goals, but more so thinking about him. Until one day, about a few months into it, I went into the gym and our paths crossed and just struck up a conversation. I basically just said, you've been really killing it. You've been setting a high bar for me. And he stated back, but much to my surprise, no, I've been watching you. You've been doing great. You're really pushing me every time I see you here. And long story short, that one conversation evolved into a friendship where every day I wasn't going to the gym scared and pitying myself and frustrated. I was going in energized and hopeful and inspired, because I knew that this person didn't want me to fail. He actually wanted me to succeed. And that it was really me talking myself down and going back to allowing my emotions and my fear to get the better of me and feeling judged. So I think in the world of fitness, that's just an initial analogy, is that we go into a gym sometimes if we're not in shape, and we start to think that the world is watching us, and we're doing the same thing. We're judging others just as much as they're judging us. It's a human behavior. But in reality, the world, if we can kind of recognize that our own interpretations of what's happening are not necessarily the reality of the situation, all of a sudden we can approach things much differently. Instead of going into retirement, as an example, thinking, oh, so-and-so has so much more than I have, or they have a bigger house, or they have a bigger car, or whatever it might be. Now you're going in with this mindset of going back to this gentleman. His name was Josh. When I saw Josh was improving himself and I was improving myself. We can both work toward our goals and both improve. It wasn't a win-lose situation. It was, we both can win. And I've seen families that have modest incomes and families that have significant incomes. And in both scenarios, in any scenario, you can find families or individuals that are very happy and fulfilled in their lives, and others that are not. It doesn't. Wealth gives stability, which is very important, but beyond that, the level of added joy that money brings, it kind of flattens out after a while. Having the thinner TV or the nicer car, it's a moment of happiness, but it's not really what brings that happiness into your life. It is about mindset. It is about how you view the way you're living.
Yeah, yeah. And so this brings me to your latest book, Owning the Dash, the No Regrets Retirement Roadmap. So what are the key challenges you think retirees have got, which is kind of different from the people of working age?
So a few key items. From a practical standpoint, I think a lot of times individuals go into retirement and they just kind of have, as I said, this mindset of what's going to happen. And they say, all right, these are my retirement assets, and this is what I'm going to live off of. And all of a sudden, now they're home and they start looking around and they realize, I need to fix the roof of the house, or I need to get a major car repair, or a lot of surprise things start to pop up that they notice because now they have time to notice them. And all of a sudden that nest egg that was there for retirement starts to shrink because there's a lot of upfront projects that come into play. So I think one of the biggest things that is really key about before you make the transition into retirement, it's try to do that assessment. What short-term things do I need to make sure I'm prepared for, or we're prepared for, so that when we go in, it is, we're not having a lot of surprises. We're not having a lot of, we're going in with kind of a game plan of, we have a clean slate to work off of. So that would be number one. I think that's, those are what part of the idea of regrets, like, oh, I didn't plan for this and now it's here and now I need to adjust the plan I originally had. So that's number one. Number two is that we hear the word budget and we think it's, some individuals may not, even the smile there, it's not always the most attractive word. Budget doesn't necessarily mean that you have to, someone has to tell you how to spend your money, but it's really important to know what your budget or your standard of living is going into retirement, because once you're there, if you don't kind of have a sense of what that monthly income need or what those unique annual expenses are, like a vacation or certain other types of expenses, things get messy very quickly. One of the biggest things, one of the most successful things I've seen with families is that if they can systematize as much as possible and keep the emotion out of it, just like you get a paycheck on a periodic basis, if you can have that same income coming to you once you start retirement, as almost as though there's no change to it, then you just life becomes easier. It's one less thing for you to have to focus on and think about. And the only real way to create that income stream, the first thing you have to know is, what is it that I really need to live off of? It's not the same income because you might have been saving a portion of your income. You may have certain liabilities that are paid off. So knowing what that monthly income need is, or that periodic income, really helps to figure out, okay, now that I know what I need, how am I going to create that income stream from the assets that I have? So once you know that income stream, the next piece, or the last major piece, I would say, is knowing where you're going to pull it from. A lot of times people have different assets, different vehicles that they've used to fund their retirement, and they just kind of lump it all into one category. And the reality is that we kind of need to know, what is the short-term money I'm going to need, and what's going to be sitting there. Because if I'm retiring in my 60s and I may live into my late 80s or 90s, that's a long time that money's got to last. And just saying that everything is going to be needed in the next 10 years is not necessarily a good success game plan for retirement.
Yeah. And do you find that people are fearful of that like 30-year retirement, or they're really looking forward to it with significant vigor?
It's amazing how we all want to live longer until we plan for retirement, and then all of a sudden we don't want to live longer anymore. And it's also interesting how, when you talk about family history and someone might have a family member that's in their 90s or has longevity there, they start to go, oh gosh, there's a chance that I might live that long. And it becomes a lot harder to try to justify, okay, well, if I do live this long and I need to prepare for that, oh, geez, I need to have a bit more saved, or I need to cut back on that standard of living. So I think it's something when you have to plan for it, it's not as exciting to think about, because it means you have to be a bit more realistic. In, if I want this money to last that entire period of time, then I have to be more conscious of how I'm working it. But I think it's also a reality that many individuals need to kind of accept. One of the first couples I ever worked with, the husband stated, um, he hired me at 68 and he said, I'm not living another 10 years. And about 5 years ago, he invited me to his 80th birthday party. And still going today. So just because you think something will stop, it's always easier to plan for a short life expectancy than it is for a long one. But fortunately, he did plan for a long one, so it worked out okay. So yes, I think it's always scarier when you realize you have to plan for it. But once again, peace of mind comes in once you do plan. If you do have a game plan in place, then you're not as worried and you get to enjoy life. I think a lot of things that cause us to not enjoy life is when we're worried about what other people think, what we think of ourselves, and the unknown. If you don't know if you're on track, then you're going to be worrying about it all the time. And just a little personal note on my end, in high school, they had something called superlatives, most likely to be this, most likely to do that. I was voted among my peers as the most worrisome person in our school. So for the career path I chose, it was either wonderful or terrible, but I definitely understand the worry. And part of the reason I wrote the book about Greg, my cousin, was he was the opposite. He was kind of the alpha type individual, very confident in himself and always approaching that fear. So that mindset of making that shift from being worried about everything to saying, you know what, just like Josh at the gym, Josh, he wants me to succeed. I can improve just like he can improve. All of a sudden, it's a different way you just approach your life. In other words, with retirement, thinking, oh, I'll never be able to retire, to, hey, what do I need to do to be able to retire? And now that I am retired, what do I need to do to really enjoy life? I think those are just, sooner you get those questions answered, the happier you become.
Yeah, yeah. And I think we're going to see a different retirement in the UK. I can't talk for the US, but in the UK, I think we're going to talk about a different retirement in the next 20, 30 years. And I think the classic handing in your passbook or your fob to the night watchman and say that's the last day I ever work, I think is I think things are going to shift. And I think it would be good things to shift is to see people continuing to work in some kind of way or shape or form for much longer, as long as they're getting enjoyment and something back from the work that they do.
Well, and absolutely, and I think it also goes back to that mindset of, if you think that I have to retire by a certain point and completely stop working, otherwise I'm not going to be happy, that's you convincing yourself something. Whereas if you go into something and say, maybe I can do some type of part-time work. Most individuals who have worked their entire lives, if they just cut out, they find out that for a short period of time they're happy, but all of a sudden I need something to do. And it doesn't necessarily mean you have to make the same income you were making before, but you can still find great enjoyment just with the simple things of life that don't require as much financial need.
Absolutely.
Community, relationships, family. So yes, it's definitely a different world that we're all kind of jumping into. And but then again, it seems every decade we've got something else going on. And just the past 3 years have been a very, very unique one for all of us.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. So what's the future for you then, Anthony?
So going back to the idea of families, one thing that I've also heard over my time in the industry is that I wish I had learned this when I was younger. And I think that it's one thing when you've made the transition, and there's so many things that have happened, as you said, over the decades, that it used to be that kind of you had things were a lot simpler. Now they just seem to be a whole lot more complicated. And I think that for younger individuals, especially children included, that they need to start kind of grasping these concepts sooner rather than later. Otherwise, life can get very difficult. So for one thing I've heard from parents, from grandparents, is how do I start talking to my kids about just these concepts and just kind of bring these to life. And one thing I've learned is that if you tell your kids what to do, there's a decent chance that they're going to go the opposite direction. They don't always do exactly what parents tell them to do. Sometimes they do what we show them. But kids tend to learn through stories and through conversations. So in terms of where I'm going, back in December, I actually wrote my first children's picture book, which teaches a basic financial lesson about the value of saving and just how savings can compound over time. And it was based off of something called the marshmallow study. Are you familiar with that study, or
Yeah,
have you heard of it?
I am familiar, but for the audience who doesn't know it, please let them know.
So basically what they did is they put children in a room and they gave them a marshmallow and said, I'm going to place this right here. Don't eat it. I'll be back in a few minutes. If the marshmallow is still there, I'll give you another marshmallow. And they studied to see which children could resist the temptation of the marshmallow and which ones could not. So I thought that was just kind of a very unique study because it also helped to relate to how children react in other circumstances. So I wrote a children's picture book called Dash and Nikki and the Jelly Bean Game. And there's a decent chance you'll notice really quickly that Dash and Nikki might look just like my two young children. But the gist of it is they wake up one morning and they find a letter waiting for them where they each are invited to play the jelly bean game. They start off the day with 10 jelly beans each, and they're told that for every hour they can resist, they get 5 more. And one of the children, the son, is a bit of a hoarder and wants to win. So he just hides his jelly beans so he can't see them. And his sister, Nikki, she's a bit more impulsive. She doesn't like the idea of having to wait. So she eats her jelly beans right away. And what we see happen in the book is that Dash, as the hours pass, his pile grows and grows, and Nikki sees her empty plate and gets very frustrated. And there's a little twist in the story where Dash might help his sister out. But the gist of it is that when kids read that and see that, they start to see, okay, if I save now and if I don't eat all the jelly beans now, I could have something much bigger in the future. And that same concept kind of goes to investing and just kind of immediate gratification. Sometimes if we wait, we can get something much bigger down the road. So fortunately, that story is a lot of parents and teachers have found that it's been very helpful with talking to kids and getting a conversation started, even playing the game with their kids or grandkids. And my intent is to actually write 5 or 6 additional children's picture books that each teach a different lesson in the financial world, just to have something really to be as a conversation starter that parents and grandparents can make it a family affair, something that everybody's kind of on board with. And the first Owning the Dash book was all about helping young families. The No Regrets Retirement Roadmap is all about helping retirees. And the Owning the Dash kids books, of which Dash and Nikki is the first, is about helping children, or at least helping parents have that conversation with children, and sometimes even think about it themselves, as they're reading the book. And who am I being in this book? Am I being the responsible parent, or am I being the showing my kids impulsive behavior? So just getting conversations started, I think, is the best way to do it.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you so much for your time today, Anthony. Where can people find out more about you and your great books?
Oh, thank you. Yes, the best place to go would be owningthedash.com, OWNING, thedash.com. I also have an Instagram page, Facebook page, Twitter page, but they're all the links are on that site. So
brilliant. Well, we'll put
wonderful.
all those in our show notes. And once again, thank you for your time. I really enjoyed talking to you.
Thank you. It's been wonderful.
Thank you to Anthony for taking the time to chat with me today about his great work and his wonderful books. Head over to the show notes on our website at theretirementcafe.co.uk for links to Anthony's website and, of course, his books. As ever, if you've enjoyed this episode, please do leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, as it really helps more people like you find us. And, of course, share the episode amongst your friends. You may know that I post all the episodes on my YouTube channel, which is growing fast. It's Justin King MFB. That's what you need to search for on YouTube. So for those who prefer to watch, why not head over there to subscribe so you never miss an episode. So until next time, I'm Justin King, helping you feel more informed in your retirement.